Welcome back to the Respect the Drive podcast. I'm Tedward at Garage 42 in Acton, Massachusetts, where I store my cars. But it's more than just car storage, it's fleet management. This place is getting full. We're at about 50% capacity right now, which, you know, maybe to you doesn't sound like a lot, but this place will hold 250 cars. So I'm looking out the window from the podcast studio at a fleet of people's babies. Oh my goodness. There's like Group B homologation cars. There's M5s. There's McLarens. There's a lot of Porsches. Honestly, there's a lot of Porsches here. We're going to talk about that in the podcast today. But Garage 42's mission is to provide comprehensive vehicle care, allowing you, the owner, to focus solely on the joy of ownership. That means storage, obviously, transportation. Now, this isn't just, oh, bring it to your house. This is like you have an oil change appointment, a service appointment at your Ferrari dealership. Maybe you're in Paris. Maybe you're just tired and you don't want to drive the car. Well, guess what? They'll take it there for you in an enclosed trailer. So, or you know, it's a flatbed trailer. Actually.
Well, they have the enclosed trailer, but they also have the flatbed.
The flatbed's even better.
Yeah.
They will detail your car. They'll do certain maintenance, not everything, but if you're curious about what they'll do for fluids and things, then that's something you should talk to Josh about, because they will let you know what they can handle. But basically, this is an all-inclusive situation of fleet management. So it honestly, it just enables you to spend money, because
it is an enabler for sure.
This is like every spouse's worst nightmare, to be like, no, honey, now I can have as many as I want because there's nothing stopping me.
Well, and exactly. And now she can't complain like, you know, you took.
Or he.
Yeah, exactly. She or he.
Not everybody.
Sorry to say that.
We always blame the wives on these things. It's not true. You know what? The
your
reality is,
significant other can't complain that you're spending all of the time in the garage, because guess what? You don't have to anymore. You don't have to be under there messing with the engine or doing an oil change. And, you know, your significant other's like, dinner's getting cold.
Or, sorry, honey, you don't get to park your Audi SUV in the garage because I need my McLaren to be out of the snow. And now you have to brush off your stupid SUV every day. Anyway, Garage 42 is the place to be. And if everyone else in your life kind of hates cars and thinks you're a goofball, well, guess what? You don't have to keep them around so everyone's looking at you like you're the weird neighbor with like 12 cars. Well, guess what? You can bring them here and be surrounded by people who respect your weird obsession with the vehicles that we love. So thank you to Garage 42 for hosting our podcast studio space. We love that. And I'm here again with Eddie Siegel of the Backseat Drivers podcast with Devin and Eddie, where they talk mostly inside baseball about grid life, Formula One, and all. Well, I guess it's not inside baseball with Formula One. You're an observer.
Yeah,
but
I would say our podcast has really transformed from like a car podcast to just like an us podcast. Because like half the time we're not even talking about cars. We're talking about our own BS. So.
100%. Because the holidays are coming up, I want to also shout out a couple things. I want to say Mike's Auto Body North in Saugus has done well by me, because they fixed my little rust problem after I got some rock chips on the Lexus GX460. He did an insane job. You could never tell that this hood has been redone and repainted. It's incredible. So thank you to Mike's Auto Body. Definitely check them out for anything. This is like when you need a guy, when someone says they have a guy, this is the guy.
This is the guy. So
when you're saying, hey, my Porsche has this problem, or I backed into a little tree because I was trying to wedge it into a spot at Walmart and I didn't want, I've done that. I'm telling you this because I've done this.
We are not perfect. We're human. I have backed into things. I have made mistakes. I've scratched things. It happens.
Some of the classic cars don't have cameras, so you just, shit, I tapped it. Anyway, Mike will fix it, and he doesn't. The paint matching he does is unbelievable.
I would say the other thing too is he's going to give you an honest answer. He's not going to sugarcoat it and say, "Oh yeah, we can get that fixed with some Bondo." No. He's going to say, "We need to repaint the whole side of this car. We're doing it the right way."
And the other guys are Grid Forge. My buddy Mike Alberding has this great company. You've seen my key trays, the wood ones and the metal ones. They're amazing. So Grid Forge, go check out Grid Forge. I'll put the link in the show notes. Fantastic. Anyway, we've got the ads out of the way. If you would like to advertise with us, feel free to pitch it. It'll be dirt cheap, man.
It'll be cheap.
I won't charge you cheap.
Very cheap.
You just got to pay for my gas to get to the studio, man. That's it. Just throw me a few bucks. And if you are a listener and you like what you're listening to and you like what you're watching on the YouTube channel, check out the Patreon. I'm not asking for much. Throw me $3 a month. I'm not trying to beg here, but it's just one of those things where it really does help round out a month if things change. Also, it enables us to do some more exciting things.
Exactly.
Let's get to it.
So let's talk about why we're here. Since we already talked a little bit about Garage 42, let's talk about the F1 watch party.
Yeah, so they started doing a little more community events, which is funny because neither of us are morning people.
No.
We've spent so much time together, like old days. We used to spend a lot of time together.
It's weird.
And I'm speaking very fast because I have had a lot of caffeine today because I got up and the first thing I did after I brushed my teeth was drink coffee, probably the wrong order of things. I should have brushed my teeth after the coffee. Came here, F1 watch party at Garage 42, the final race in Abu Dhabi, where I guess by now this is out. We're not spoiling anything. McLaren has won the Constructors' Champion.
Yep.
So that's cool. Good for Lando for also not only winning that for them, but winning that race.
Yeah,
because that's a good look.
He was the reason they really sealed the deal. I mean, Ferrari put up a fight. They came in second and third. They rounded out the podium, but it just was not enough.
And next season's going to look a lot different. There's going to be a lot of new players. A lot of players are out. I can't imagine we're ever going to see Checo again.
It was really sad because the way he went out this race wasn't really his fault.
I didn't catch the beginning because, like I said, I'm not a morning person. So I got here about 35 laps into the race.
Essentially, a car hit him and then spun him out, and then they probably just retired the car because they're like, "You're not getting anywhere."
Sure.
But the reality is, it was kind of the correct way for him to go out because, quite frankly, this season for him has been a dumpster fire.
I believe it.
And I don't know. I mean, he keeps saying he's going to be back in the Red Bull seat, but I don't know.
I don't think so.
I mean, look what happened to Gasly, Albon. You know, the name keeps going on and on and on.
The thing is, he's a good. He would have. He's not a great teammate because he's not fast enough to be a great teammate in that car.
He had 2.5 very good seasons as Max's teammate. 21. He saved the championship for them, really. I mean, because of all that blocking.
Right.
I don't know if you remember that. And then 22, he did pretty well.
Well, and not to mention the fact that sometimes people keep their seats because they attract viewers. This is, I swear, the only reason Danny Ricciardo got a second shot at anything. Like, I didn't really want to see him back as a driver, but like he's a fun influence to have around. But like, put him in the announcer's booth or just make him a little monkey to dance around for the people on the sidelines, which I feel bad for him because he's a great driver. He's a great driver.
He's a great driver. The problem is we're talking about the best of the best.
That's the problem.
And I think Checo is sort of running into that, I hate to say, age problem, right? I think he's gotten to an age where he's not willing to maybe not put as much effort in as he used to because he's like, well, I'm already making this X amount of money. I don't care.
I don't know how
he's got a kid. I think he's got 2 kids now. I mean, he doesn't need to be doing this anymore.
No.
And the reason I think Red Bull kept him so long was because of sponsorship. He brings in a ton of money.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter if they're winning or losing. If they bring in money, if they have the sponsors, and if they have the viewers that are going to come out. I mean, think about what happens when he goes to Mexico.
Oh my God.
It's like that
it's a holiday.
That whole place is just a Checo paradise for him.
But it will be sad. I like Perez. I always have.
Yeah.
But it's time to go.
Whatever. All right. So Formula One
done.
Next
Done. Seen it.
Been there, done that. One of the things that speaking of performance driving, I am like so psyched about the next track season because I really didn't do much this year when it came to track driving. And now I said on the last podcast that I bought a set of wheels, going to get probably a set of RE71 RSs on the FL5. We're going to do some Civic Type. And I love the Civic Type R on track. I think it's an incredible, the FL5 especially is like so dialed. It's so good. And the last time I was like seriously tracking a car was my E92 M3. This is a front wheel drive 4-cylinder. And somehow I'm like more excited to drive this on track than that car, which is bizarre.
So let's rewind the clock a little bit. The last time that I can fully remember you being invested in going to the track had to have been pre-COVID days.
I think so.
You know, like 2019, was the last year because you had done some comm event. Maybe you did one comm event and you did a few mass tuning events.
I did a few comm events and I did a few mass tuning events.
And then the pandemic hit, and then that was sort of and then the M3 started to have issues. And I think the days of you going to the track with that thing were kind of numbered because you were so concerned about just making it to the track.
Oh, yeah.
Let alone going out there.
Well, not to mention the fact that it's just like, oh, well, now like the car's like leaking fuel out of this thing, you know, dumb things where you're just like, oh, I mean, that stuff all got fixed, but still it was annoying.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I don't want to burn this car to the ground on a racetrack. Or, you know, you look at like, that was my winter daily driver. And while it held up pretty good for a daily driver in New England winters, I didn't love the idea that a lot of the brake line fittings and stuff were like rusting out and stuff. It's like, that doesn't give you a whole lot of confidence when you're doing 140 miles an hour at Thompson or Palmer and you're standing on the brakes and it's like, well, let's go. Like now I'm the idiot who
ruined the day for everybody.
Or killed myself because I drove it into a wall. Like that's not great, you know?
I totally get it. So it's been a few years. And you, for the last couple of years, have had some reservations about getting back out there.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and why you didn't?
Well, my brain works in an annoying way where I will immediately start feeling like if I'm not doing something regularly, I'm a lot more shy about doing it in front of other people, right? Okay. Meaning like if I'm not out there driving all the time, then I'm like, wait, am I okay? Can I do this? Is this going to be fun? Am I going to like fuck up this car? Which I've never done. It's always been fine. And it really is a matter of just getting out there and doing it. So it's just like, I put it this way. I think it's like, if you're a musician, I mean, how many musicians do you know that consistently always play an instrument? Like not many.
Not many.
Most time, like they get into a groove. Suddenly you're like, oh yeah, I've been playing guitar a little more. But if you put it down for a year, and then someone says, hey, come play a gig with us. Like, let's jam at this like little open mic thing or like whatever. You'd probably be like, I don't think so. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not in practice. You know, I don't know. And so I would start to get a little bit like that, where it's just the simple act of not doing something makes it so much easier to continue not doing something. That's why everyone gains weight, because maybe you were a gym rat for 6-8 months. Then something in your life happens. You either get injured or you're traveling a lot or there's family stuff. And suddenly you're not able to really do that. And then every day you're like, should I go for a run? Oh, I didn't run for the last 3 weeks, so I'm good. I'll do it next week. And then next week turns into 3 years later.
No, I understand that. And I think also what a lot of people also don't know is that you went through multiple cars before, you know, you had the SI, and that really wasn't going to be a track car.
It was an in-betweener. Yeah. That car was specifically meant to get me out of the M3 in a clean cut way, get me something that was like because like in terms of reliability and ease of ownership, that was the complete opposite of an M3. Yeah. And then I knew the Type R was coming and I thought, oh, I'll enjoy my SI and then I'll get into the Type R. Yeah. And it worked really clean.
Oh, absolutely. You did it the right way.
So thank you to McGovern Honda in Everett, actually, because they made that really, really easy.
Yeah. It's so funny. That feels like a decade ago.
I don't remember. But all right. So the thing is, the FL5 is going to be easier to get prepped for the track than the M3 was, I think, because
for sure.
I mean, the M3 is heavy. The FL5 is lighter on its feet. It already has like better brakes than the M3 ever had. What the FL5 needs is simply two things. Really, it's stickier tires, which I can get, and I've got wheels coming. So that way the reason you do this isn't necessarily because a PS4S can't do it, but really it's like if you have your daily driver on like a max performance summer tire, like a Michelin, and then you're going to take it to the track 4 or 5, whatever, like those tires are gone.
They're gone.
So like that sucks. Whereas it's nice when you can be like, oh, let's pop off these wheels and tires, throw on these ones that if something bad happens to them, if you hit a curb too hard or you fuck them up, or if something happens to these, you know, you just destroy these tires. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy you're doing this. I do want to interject for a second. So there was a time period, I don't know if you remember this, where you wanted to get back to the track, but you didn't want to do it with your daily driver. Because after the whole M3 thing, remember, you were like, I don't want to do that again, this and that. So you waited until you got the Lexus. And now the Type R really didn't have a role, right?
It feels really... So I had two things. One was the tires. The other thing is the brakes. I think the cooling system in that car is fine for what I'm doing. It's going to be fine to do a 15-minute session. Yeah. I'm not worried about that. The second thing, though, brakes. And there's two things about the brakes. One is the stability control system is very intrusive, and it will light up those rears like crazy trying to keep it stable because the car is a little tail happy. Yeah. So it's going to break that inside rear to try to like lock you down. And what you do is you do the pedal dance. You can't just hit VSC off because that will not turn it fully off. It will always remain slightly on. So you got to do this goofy thing where you turn it on, like the parking brake on and off, and this on and off, and hit the brake and blah, blah, blah. So if you don't know what that is, check it out. The Topher can show you how to do that. And then the other thing is there are these titanium pad shims from Paragon that it's a spacer basically from the caliper to the caliper pistons to the brake pad.
Correct.
That allows for exponentially more cooling, which means that you don't you got to remember when you hit the brakes, there's a lot of heat going on. And most people think, oh, look at all this heat in the rotors because they see a rotor glow.
Yeah.
Don't forget that that's also in the pads. And that's also in the backing plate of the pads, which then transfers to the pistons, which then transfers to the fluid.
The fluid. And people forget that all the time.
So yes, you want to put in a higher temperature fluid in your track day car. So that's why, if you have a stock car, they'll be fine. But if you do a dozen repeated hard stops on a stock system, it's going to start getting mushy, and then it could potentially boil if you're not managing those temperatures, right? And that's the thing. Remember, none of this is the fault of a car. It is the fault of the driver for not managing what the car is capable of.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can put in a higher temp brake fluid. What do we use? We use
I use 600.
The RBF. Is that what it is?
RBF 600.
Resting bitch face. Is that really what it's called? Well, I don't remember anymore.
600. Yeah. I mean, I use 700. Or maybe it's 660.
I use 600. You use 660. I don't need the 660. But remember, all right. So anyway, it just allows you to get more heat into those brakes.
Is it really RBF? I'm sorry. I got to go back to that.
I don't know. In my head,
I need to look this up.
I think it is. And now I'm laughing because why have I never laughed at that before? But anyway, the reason why a lot of people don't just immediately put that kind of brake fluid, it is, right? It is. It's funny. Yeah. Why have we never made that joke before to each other?
Know.
When you put in a higher temp brake fluid, it is more hygroscopic. Is that the word? So it absorbs water from the air, basically, which means that you have to change your fluid more often because water boils at a much, much, much lower temperature than these brake fluids do. So if you have a more hygroscopic brake fluid, then if you just existing in the world is going to make it so that way it's going to absorb more water. And so you just got to change it more often, which if you're doing track days anyway, you would, but that's why you wouldn't use this brake fluid day to day because I'm the M5. I think I did one flush of that car in 10 years. Oh, I mean, I'm sure it was fucked, but I never lost the brakes.
Probably looked like mud.
It was gross. Yeah. There's a video of that. But anyway, so really it's just wheels, tires, brake fluid, brake shims, and then you have a ton of pads. So I'm not really concerned about blasting through the stock brake pads.
So for any listener with a FK8 or FL5, and you've never gone on track before, you're not going for lap records, you could just get in the car and go to the track. Absolutely. You don't need to do anything.
I think the problem is I'm used to having stickier rubber.
You're different. You've gotten past that phase. And I'm not saying you shouldn't try it on the stock tires. It might be interesting just to see the difference, but a lot of people assume that you have to mod the shit out of your car to make it track worthy. And
you can drive anything on a racetrack as long as you manage the car.
Exactly. You can take just about anything out there as long as you manage the car and your expectations of what that car is capable of. A lot of people, unfortunately, go to the internet and the internet says suspension, coilovers, brakes, oil cooler, intercooler, all this stuff.
And they go out 3 times.
And then they go out and they've never been out before. They don't know what they're doing. And they're never even going to get to the tail end of the car's ability. And it's going to be much more difficult to drive because you've never driven it like that before, let alone at this limit. So I always tell people, if you're going to, modify your car, do it in steps so you can feel the difference and know what the car needs.
Well, also, that's the biggest thing because what happens is cars for a racetrack, street cars are not balanced for a racetrack. No. And what I mean that is, for example, if you have a Hellcat, okay, and you go out in a Hellcat's a great, fun, alarmingly fast tool on a racetrack, except if you have Hellcat power, it means that your brakes are not going to last as long as a Civic, right?
No.
Because now you need to bring a car down from 160 instead of 115 or 120. So there's the balance, right? But that doesn't mean you can't take it on track. It just means that if you're going to do a hot lap, you get 1 or 2.
You get 1 or 2. And
then you got to cool it down. and then you go back out. You can continue driving, but what you cannot do is you cannot take a stock Hellcat and then just put it up against like a modified Civic and say we're going to run together at pace for 15 minutes. Not going to fucking happen. It's not going to happen.
I mean, even F1 cars cannot do the full time in a qualifying session. They slow down after 2 laps.
Yep. Or a heavy car is going to overheat tires much faster. Yep. So even if your brakes are fine, your tires are going to start to waste away. Like they're going to get greasy. It's not going to be sticky anymore. And so you're going to be like, oh, the car's disappearing on me. So there's the difference, right? Are you trying to go for a hot lap? Like when I go to a track day, I'm trying to do like 2 things really. 1, I'm trying to have fun, explore the limits of my car, become a better driver. 2, at some point during the day, I want to set a lap for myself where I'm going to say, ooh, that's my time attack hot lap. That's what this car can do. That's what I can do. But what you can't do is you can't say, I'm here for 5 hours. I'm going to just session this like I'm on a racing simulator, because it's not a race car. It's a street car that you've just modified enough to manage what you're doing. So anyway, I feel like that's enough. But my big excitement is, I think, Lime Rock and Watkins Glen this year. Those are the two that I'm really excited for.
I think we got to do a Palmer Day.
We haven't done that. We'll do Palmer. We'll do Canaan. But like you said, the freedom of having this car not be my daily driver.
That's the big thing.
Because
that's the big difference.
And it allows me to prep it a little further in advance. Yeah. You know, I'm like, oh, well, I can just do what I need to do. Or it's at Garage 42. We can bring it up to our shop.
Take it over to the race
RS
shop.
Pro.
I mean, I have so many spares of things for this car.
Yeah.
So, and I'm so excited to see this because I've seen FL5s on track and they're just such a evolution of the FK8. And it's things that like are so like the speed, the way it builds speed, and the way it manages its heat is so much better than my generation car. I'm just so excited to see it. So
yeah, I agree. All right. What else
what's
got?
next?
I've got a bunch of questions from people because I put that on the Instagram.
Okay. I was going to say, do you want to talk about Sim? We're just doing that for a while.
There's one question that I really liked.
So let's do it.
It was, where the heck did it go? Oh, everyone's obsessed with Porsche. Has it become overrated? And this is from Shiv ENRK5. I don't know. Shivan. Shivan RK5. I wasn't sure if it was just Shiv. I'm used to the show Succession. So
I was going to say, is this Succession? Is this the daughter?
So I think in the quick answer to this is I don't think they're overrated. I think Porsche is one of the only companies that's still making enthusiast cars like the way we want them to.
I have 2 sides to this because, and I don't want the entire Porsche community to go after us.
And you're going to get canceled,
but
baby.
Yeah, I'm going to get canceled.
Make January 6th look like a picnic.
Porsche makes unbelievable vehicles.
Yeah.
For the mostly general public. Upper middle class to the star to the stars.
It is actually a real broad spectrum.
That's what I mean.
Because you have a Macan that like a normal middle class person could buy.
Macan or Cayman,
what, 50, 60 grand, and then it goes up to whatever, like $500,000-$600,000 for whatever their
depending on their hypercar. It can go even higher. So they do make great vehicles for a wide range of people, and they do a fantastic job. However, I would say it's not about the company itself. It's about the people who buy them. And I would go as far to say that there is nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with anybody who buys a 911, but I think they've become almost overrated to a degree.
I think they're just too ubiquitous in terms of like the problem is they're so good.
They're so good
that if someone says, I have this much money to spend, what should I buy? If that number is like 200 grand, you go, oh, get yourself a nice GT3. Yeah. Because you're like, well, what about this Ferrari? You're like, well, and the thing is, the Porsche community, you make a big point about the community as well, because when you buy a Porsche, you also buy into the idea that like, oh, well, I'll be included in these track events or I'll be included in these meets or whatever. It makes it a little easier. And also, Porsche people are more likely to shame you for not driving your car than like Ferrari people.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And they do typically present a reliable option for both street enthusiasm and track enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Because you can, I wouldn't think twice. Like you give me a GT4, an RS, a GT3, even like a Carrera S, whatever, and say, we're going to the track. I'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to see a check engine light.
Oh yeah,
Do that in a 600 LT and let's talk.
I mean,
No offense to McLaren, but like you're more likely to probably
issues.
have something where I had a weird transmission fault. The car won't die, but it might hiccup on you.
things just happen. So yeah, I mean, it's not about the brand. I mean, I think the brand is what it is. It's been very similar for the last 30 plus years. I think they've gotten a little too, I don't know, crazy with their options. I think that's become a little.
Hey,
little
a
much.
guy's got to eat.
But you know what? People are buying it, so whatever, it works.
You get to not buy the options if you'd like. So, if they present, like, I know everyone gets like up in arms with like, oh my God, this paint costs, $17,000. Well, then don't do it.
Then don't do it, and they won't option it. Clearly, people are buying it. So
Absolutely.
But the thing that does make me concerned, and you and I have talked about this off camera and just to ourselves privately, the cost. And everything's more expensive. We talked about this last podcast. But a GT3 used to be somewhat attainable. Now, because of the GT3 tax and everything else and all the great, what everybody talks about and how great it is, it's inflated these cars to a point where they're unattainable now.
Oh, they're absurd. I mean, the 992.2, to me, especially GT3 world, it's not a huge change. It's like a facelift, like an objective facelift. Like it changed the bumpers and stuff. Okay. You lose the tachometer. Now it's fully screened. You lose the key. Now it's got that button. Kind of dumb little things, but like enough that I'm like, that's silly. And the weird thing about dot two in the 992 generation is that you do not get any change to the powertrain really. It used to be like from a dot one to a dot two and 996 and 997, you're like getting an engine.
Yeah,
you're
usually they stroke it.
991 too. Like, 991 went from like that 3.8 to the 4 liter.
I know.
And it was a reliable 4 liter. That was actually a marked change where those dot ones, people were like, oh yeah, that's the one that had the stop sail because of the fires. That's the one that had like weird engine seizing issues and stuff like that. And going to the 4 liter was like, it's solved. And the car comes in a manual. Remember that? We did not have a manual dot one GT3, and then the dot two comes out and says, hey, you can have a manual. That was a major change. That was like, holy shit, we need to get this. And it got dot one owners to sell their cars, trade their cars, and get the new one. Nobody is going to be jumping out of their 992 GT3 to get into the dot two. Because I don't think, if you need to have the latest and greatest, you might do it. If it's going to get you the option you want. But really, this dot two, to me, was a course correction on value. Because they upped the price 40 or 50 grand on MSRP, which does one of two things. One, I think it kind of course corrects for what the value of the car kind of should be, which I hate to say, but I do think that's true. Two, I think if you have an unlimited, let's say it's not a limited run of cars, but you are limited by your capacity as a factory, right? As a manufacturer. So it's an unlimited car, but let's say you have the ability to make 5,000 cars, let's say. Let's just put a number out there. You can make 5,000 cars. You get 20,000 orders at the 992.1 price. Well, who the fuck cares if you raise it and lose orders, because you can only make 5,000. So if you make 5,000 and you get 10,000 orders instead of 20 or 30,000 orders, you still made the same amount of cars and you charged more for them. So as a company, you're gonna, like, business wise, it sucks in terms of like for your customers, but to you, you're like, well, why don't I just make the same, like more money making the same cars? And look, I'm not speaking from like some insider baseball thing. I don't know. No one said that to me, but that's what I'm seeing, or I'm kind of like interpolating from the situation.
Yeah. It just sucks because, like, they're now 200 plus.
But what I am a little antsy or weirded out about in the future is this new EV Cayman.
I think it's
I
don't know.
You know what I don't like about this? So the reason a Cayman looks like a Cayman is because it's mid-engine. It's a mid-engine rear-wheel drive sports car with 2 seats and 2 doors and a frunk. So you put an engine in the middle, you have a trunk in the back, a trunk in the front, and a fuel tank in the front. Great. When we go to EV, it appears to me that the shapes of these cars are remaining the same from a recognizable standpoint, just so that way you recognize it as a Cayman, not necessarily because you need to have the space for this motor or these batteries. Like, what I like about the Cayman is that, or the 911 for that matter, being rear engine, those are form matching its function. So they were like, okay, we're putting an engine in the back, so it has to look like this. This is the shape you're going to get. If you want storage, you got to put it up front, right? If you want this, you got to do this. If you want that, you got to do that. When it's an EV, it's like you have options that you don't need to, they don't need to meet the criteria of a mid-engine flat six Cayman.
Yeah.
So why does it look like that? Unless you're just really objectively choosing for it to look like that.
I mean, Porsche is notorious for never changing styling.
It's absolutely.
I mean, look at the 911. But
anyway, that's all. That's
I
just
agree.
From an engineering standpoint.
I'm sure it'll be a fantastic driving EV, but it's still an EV. And regardless of how you feel about them, it's heavy. It's not going to last that long on the racetrack if you do plan on tracking it. And I can't see the value staying like a ICE one would, you know? So I have my concerns. And also a lot of these big companies are starting to realize nobody wants EVs. And now they've spent all this R&D budget on these cars that I don't know who's buying it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's concern. Speaking of giant companies, let's talk about Nissan. Because this is a company that, just like Jag, really is in trouble.
Oh, Nissan. All right. So I actually kind of like Nissan in terms of, I think I have to give a lot of props for the GTR still existing. I have to give a lot of props for the new Z, even though it's not my favorite car and I won't buy one.
It's beautiful.
I think it's beautiful. And I think it is one of the, like, if I'm sitting here moaning about the fact that everything's so synthetic and whatever, it's a twin turbo V6 rear wheel drive car that still drives like a 350Z.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. The problem is the price and execution are just a little off. Like if that was a $30,000 car, holy cow, would we be in business? The problem is it's not. It's a like $50,000 or $60,000 car, depending on how you've set it up or whatever, maybe even more. That's where you're like, I'm going to buy a Supra.
So you've had a Z in your past.
Yeah, I owned a 350Z for like 6 years.
How much was that new?
Brand new.
Like someone who, like, you know, you're going to the dealership.
$26,000.
Okay, they're way off.
26.5 maybe. Yeah. I paid 12. I paid 12 for that car. And with 36,000 miles on it. And it was an 03. It was a base. So no limited slip,
no
open
options.
diff, 17-inch wheels, Silverstone, black interior, not power, no power, anything but windows. So the seats were manual. I love that car. It was a 6-speed. It was it was a Japanese Corvette. It was a stripper Corvette. It was great. It was fun.
Fast.
It was pretty quick for the day.
The new Z to me is just like you said, overpriced. And it's not good enough on the track to be considered a track car.
Right.
And it's not good enough on the road to be considered, oh, this is such a great car on the back roads.
Which is why Nissan's in trouble.
Yeah.
Because if you are a company, you need a halo car that says everything about your brand. So, you know, Porsche has 911 GT2 RS or whatever the hell they're doing. Yeah. And those are cars that have to perform. They have to be dream cars. They you have to want them. But I haven't wanted to want a GTR since 2012. I haven't wanted a Z since 2012.
Yeah.
Even then, like I didn't want a 370 because it was just a face. But what I'm trying to say is, if your halo cars don't appeal to people in a way that they dream of, lust after, have to have, will spend a lot of money on, and will always be like, wow, we can't make enough of these, or we're limiting production so we can charge more or whatever, then your lower end cars are not going to do well. But what I also see is, yes, if you look on the road, this is not like Jaguar. I see Nissans everywhere. Everyone buys a Rogue. Everyone buys an Altima. Sentra, whatever, maybe not so many Maximas, but like they're out there. Okay. The problem, I believe, leads to their dealer solutions, because what Nissan often did was provide insane rebates or deals for people, which obviously, you know, that's not great for earning money or profits. They also aimed at like subprime type style people and loans. So this is the kind of thing where like people will, and you know, I'm not getting insider information, but from what I've observed, it does appear that if you have maybe a very, very low credit rating, it would likely be easier to get yourself into a Nissan than it would be into a Toyota or a Honda. Right.
Okay.
So I think the way this company worked was like it had loyalty from consumers who were maybe on the outs financially and were able to get into these cars, which may lead to, it's not a huge leap to think that like some slightly like financially less responsible people might be the reason for some of the reputations of the drivers when it comes to the Altima reputation. Yeah. So maybe that big Altima energy is reflected on some of those characteristics as well. I'm not positive.
Big spending
this
energy.
This is alleged. This is just speculation, but it's
They go hand in hand.
I'm just trying to connect some dots.
Yeah.
Here, okay. But I think that's what got them in trouble, because I don't necessarily like with Jag, you're like, well, you lost 80% of your sales over year. Whereas like, I don't know that Nissan isn't selling cars. But I think their whatever their strategy when it comes from manufacturer to dealer, I think must have gone bust at some level.
It tanked because, I mean, the Pathfinder's a decent vehicle. No one's buying it. The Altima Maxima have been the same since, I don't know, 2013.
I don't mind the Altima though. I drove it and I'm like, this is a fine car, and it's okay. Like those are okay. I think they do.
It reminds me of like a dollar store product. You know, like the way they're going about selling their vehicles is, you know, you might not get the best, but you'll always get it.
Oh, hang on. David's on the phone. I'm going to put him on the mics, and I might cut this out if he's saying something horrible. David, you're on the podcast right now. What is going on?
Oh, that's funny. I was just going to call about the podcast.
What's happening?
I was going to suggest that you guys should start doing trivia.
Ooh, I like that idea.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you have any trivia for us right now?
I have a perfect trivia game, but it would require me to stop.
Okay.
I can explain the game.
Okay. I like that idea. But if you have any trivia questions right now that you're like, hey, what is the thing? Feel free to challenge us.
Let me think. You're going to have to cut it.
He's not good on the spot.
I'm trying to think about some obscure car fact that you guys wouldn't know, but I would.
Did you hear upskirt too?
Yeah, I
he
heard
said
upskirt.
obscure, but I'm like a filthy boy, and I thought you said upskirt car fact.
It's a dirty car fact.
Oh my God. All right. If you think of something, call back.
I see.
All right. So anyway,
We need to get a caller.
We
need to get callers.
That's
calling
great.
in. That's a great idea.
I'm afraid because I don't know what kind of monsters. I guess it's not live, so it doesn't matter.
Obscure.
So anyway, back to Nissan. Nissan, I think they may be taken over by Honda, which
Really, that's the rumor.
that's the rumor. And I haven't read anything about why that works, but in my brain, what I see is Honda needs to electrify, right? So
Oh yeah, Nissan's
got that. They were the first major OEM in the United States to have an electric car, really, or like mass-produced electric car with the Leaf. That was a big deal. That was the thing. So they have EV tech. Honda
Aria.
Honda needs it because they were partnered with GM with the Ultium platform on the Prologue. Before that car even came out, they were like axing that deal. They were like, we're out, and they have their own thing coming out in the near future. So they are doing their own thing. But if they have access to either more EV build capacity through Nissan, or if they have access to their technology, maybe that can help the future of Honda's EV wants, desires, and forecasting. And then the other thing is Nissan could probably use Honda's dealership and sales knowledge, because Honda's
They sell themselves.
They sell the shit out of those Hondas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Look, if we go to a Nissan dealership and you try to get into a Rogue or a Murano or whatever the hell, you're gonna pay under MSRP. You would have to really be an idiot probably to have to pay MSRP. Whereas at Honda, if I want a new Honda Civic Si, not a fucking chance are you getting that MSRP. You're gonna have to pay 5 over probably.
Or they have those cars loaded up with dealer options and all that crap.
Yeah, so I think Honda plays that game pretty darn well.
They do.
They know what they're doing.
Well, also I think Honda has created almost like a Porsche-like fan base where people swear by these cars. And rightfully so. They're great vehicles.
Yeah.
Most of them are, except for that Honda EV car. Actually, you drove one of those.
Which one?
The GM one.
Oh, the Prologue?
Can you give me sort of a quick synopsis of your driving experience? Because you didn't really talk about. I know you put a video out.
I put a video out, and like I said, I don't like to I don't like to shit on a car. I don't.
I know you
because to me, I'm just trying to convey the experience, and you as the viewer
Can
based
make
on
that
what
decision.
you
Yeah.
decide whether you
I
want to
get it.
shit on it or not. Especially because I know everyone puts a shitload of work into making these cars. So the Prologue is a trailblazer. It is an it's an Ultium platform EV.
Okay.
It's a Chevy Trailblazer, and from a lot of perspectives, it is unchanged. So the battery, the powertrain, the interior in terms of like user interfaces, that's all Chevrolet.
All GM,
All of
okay.
them. So you open the door, the key, it all ding ding. It's all the same stuff, right? Then what Honda was able to do was they were given the opportunity to restyle the car, so
Okay.
it looks like a Honda.
New
It has-
body panels,
new body
yeah.
panels, all that stuff, and Honda retuned the suspension.
Oh, okay.
So it's their suspension. So it does not drive like a Trailblazer, or a Blazer. Sorry, I might have been saying Trailblazer. I don't mean Trailblazer. I mean Blazer. It is not as good as I was led to believe. So, for example, when we went to the press launch, the big story on this was like, look, it was basically in the shortest form possible. We know it's a Chevy, but we did this incredible job tuning the suspension. It'll drive like a Honda. It'll drive like a Honda. It'll drive like a Honda. And so that was the thing. And they planted that seed. When I drove the car, I just think that was a little bit exaggerated.
Okay.
So when I drove the car, it's a fine car. It's just that, yeah, it is kind of heavy. It's a little bulky, which is not how Hondas drive. Hondas always drive a little light.
Yeah.
And so when it came to the suspension tuning, maybe if you're like measuring the way it oscillates or something, maybe that's similar or akin to a Pilot or something. But in terms of how I felt chucking the car into a corner, I've driven everything in the Honda lineup. Except for Passport. I haven't driven a Passport in a long time. But I mean, I've driven Pilot. I've driven.
Isn't a Passport just a shortened Pilot?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But either way, like even a Pilot, I think I had fun. Like I drove it in Sedona in Arizona, and I was chucking this thing into corners and having a good time. And like I'm like, it drives like a Honda. And this, it just didn't quite meet the expectation that I had. And the other side of it is it's not cheap. It's $60,000.
Whoa.
It's very expensive. Which I don't know that it's very expensive relative to its EV competition, but for what you're getting, you would really need to have decided, A, I must have a Honda, and B, it must be electric. Those are the reasons I think you buy a Prologue.
Can you get a good deal on them right now?
Likely, yes. I would imagine you could get some
Would
good
you
deals.
say if you wanted a Honda and it needed to be EV, would that be a good
It's
purchase?
your only option if those are
Oh,
your-
it is.
There's no other EV Hondas, so you have to.
Okay.
But
well,
that's what I'm saying. I
great
just,
buying advice.
Yeah, I don't know. And this has nothing to do with Honda, but just EVs in general, from a financial standpoint, are not always great. They depreciate like rocks. So it's hard to recommend some of these things, especially if your goal is like, oh, I'd like to spend less money on fuel. Okay, I can get that done. But if you lose $25,000 in the first year on a car, well, who the fuck cares about the fuel cost? That was pennies.
I always
That number,
think-
by the way, that's not me saying Honda Prologue loses $25,000. That's just, I was just throwing out a number in general for EVs.
yeah.
I don't know what the depreciation on
I
that car is.
always, I can always have a relation between an EV car and a cell phone. I always think of those very similar in the sense of the technology, is reinvented so quickly within 5 years, let's say.
Yes.
You don't want to, when was the last time you had a 5-year-old iPhone and have been like, this is great?
No, it's to the point where you're like, you feel like a hermit. So
So
like, I might as well not have a phone if I have a 5-year-old phone.
In 5 years' time, when the next Prologue or whatever comes out, and you're sitting there with yours, and the screen takes forever to load, this and that, it gets half the range it used to, and you've lost a ton of money. That's when it becomes more of a question as to who is this for?
Yeah.
And I think back to the beginning, that's what it is. Speaking of Honda, I just want to say the new Passport looks
So hot.
awesome.
So hot.
Oh my gosh. I didn't think they were going to do something like that.
Honda's funny because when you look at a Passport, when you look at a Pilot, you don't think off-road.
No.
Because it's a unibody, it's like a Durango SRT.
It's an
is a
FF.
unibody
Yeah.
thing. You're like, oh, this is like it's a weapon for the road, and it's meant to be able to like do a little bit like, oh, okay, we went up a gravel path. It's got all-wheel drive. You're
Yeah.
good with the snow in New Hampshire or whatever. Dude, I have off-roaded a Pilot, a Trail Sport Pilot, and in Arizona, and I'm going to tell you, they sent us up some shit that should not have been able to do. It looks so good.
Look at that.
That looks so good.
It looks like a Bronco.
What they do is on the Trail Sports, I don't know, I didn't look up the Passport, but I know on the Pilots, they put like these big steel under trays to protect everything.
Okay.
The fuel tank, because this is the thing. It's not like some wildly articulating suspension like a body on frame truck. It's an SUV. It's just a unibody SUV. So what they do is they set it up so you can smash the shit out of these panels. And we did. Like, I drove this up a thing where people were going up these like crazy trails with all these rocky obstacles. And I loved watching like these dudes in these like lifted Jeeps and Tacomas with like 37-inch tires. And we're driving up in a fleet of brand new Pilots and doing the same thing and doing it well and slamming into shit, and it didn't matter. It was so much fun. And they showed us the Honda's PR team is really good at illustrating like their tech and what's good about things. So like, for example, with the crash test, they had this Honda Pilot that they crash tested side impact, and they brought this car everywhere. And it's like it's minimal intrusion on the B pillar. Like, it's crazy. It was like a 35-mile-an-hour hit with this with another Honda Pilot essentially. And it like barely looks like it was deformed. It was like, oh, show us the crash test. They're like, this is the car. You'd think it would be destroyed. Yeah. It wasn't. Then when we got to the top of this like mountain, this hill, this mountain thing, they're loading the cars up on these crazy angles and stuff. They showed us the under trays for the cars that they used as like testers out in like Moab and Arizona and stuff. And they were like bashed the fuck out of, but none of them were intrusive enough to like hit a fuel tank, hit an oil pan, hit a gearbox. So they really allowed. It is hysterical that these cars are like capable of what they are, because they are not Land Rovers, they are not Raptors, they are not Jeeps, they're Honda Pilots. No. It's your family SUV, but you can beat the living snot out of them on the off-road trails, and it's actually hysterical. And I think it's more fun. It's like when you see somebody in a Subaru Outback doing things.
Oh yeah, doing trail stuff. Yeah,
and everyone's out there in their lifted trucks, like, oh, we need this, and this dude comes up in basically a stock Outback and like does the same thing, and you're like, oh, maybe we're underestimating what we needed or overestimating what we needed.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my take. I love when Honda does weird off-road shit with cars that shouldn't be off-road.
Yeah, it's weird. Honda goes through these like, even flow, right? Like,
yes,
they go really out of this world. They have some crazy ideas, crazy designs, and then for the next couple of years, they just stay steady, stay safe. They just do small incremental upgrades.
Dude, nobody gets called out on cost cutting like Honda. Like, remember when the 9th gen Civic came out?
Terrible.
And it was like a little cost cutty, and they didn't like the interior and stuff. And they were like, it must have been 16 months before that other car came out. And they were like, never mind. And they like fixed everything.
Yeah.
And the same goes like when they update like a Civic today, your FK8 got updated with like little things like, oh, you get a volume knob instead
every
of this.
year was different. Yeah.
And that's another thing is I don't know if it's quite as obvious anymore, but they used to really every single year cars would go through changes. It's hard to keep track of Hondas because even though maybe your like S2000 is an AP1 or an AP2, guess what?
The
year
ECU
to year
is different.
They're different, like year to year. Like they change, and especially like suspension stuff on those S2000s, like they are actually different year to year. And you cannot just say AP. Yeah, for major things like a drive shaft, like we've learned on Gears of Gasoline, it changes from AP1 to AP2. But on setup and stuff, they really do hone those. And they do it quietly. They don't talk about it.
I was going to say, they usually don't. I mean, they might set out like a small press release about it.
Barely.
But they're not going at dealerships and be like, yeah, you can sell this because the now it has a knob for the radio.
Or we changed the spring rate by 22 pounds. Yeah. They're not telling you that.
No, they're not telling you that. And they don't have to.
No, but the thing is, the cars hold up. They do better, and people are just like, man. And it's weird if you watch someone, they'd be like, yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of this, but like this year, I kind of like it. It's like, yeah, because it's different. Yeah, it's actually different.
That 9th gen was the worst.
It was.
So I worked as a salesperson at Honda during that.
I can't believe you sold cars.
And it was fantastic. Think about how bad I am at that.
Did you smoke cigarettes?
Oh yeah. I'm just kidding. I would never. it was like trying to, like, we had so many 9th gens on the lot that nobody wanted.
You know what's funny though?
Nobody.
They still knew how to win me over because that like ice cream orange paint job on the 9th Gen SI.
Oh God, pumpkin.
I'm staring at a McLaren right now that basically looks like that car, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I still like it. But I mean, it's no 8th Gen in terms of like.
Well, so the problem is they got rid of, and it was the beginnings of the end for those high revving engines.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, the K24 is now in just about every race car under the sun.
Yeah, well, it's reliable.
For old
And
Hondas.
It turns out when you don't rev to 9,000
Makes more
RPM, things
torque.
last a little
Yeah.
longer too. You know.
So people were pissed about that. It was heavy. It was slower. And then the other car that nobody wanted, I'm sure you probably don't even remember this, the 2nd Gen Insight and the CRZ. Those
Correct,
two
yeah.
cars were.
And that's the thing is Honda will come. Honda's like ahead of its time sometimes. Like that Insight is like the coolest in the
way
world.
ahead of its time.
But what Honda does, unfortunately, or fortunately and unfortunately, I always say this when I drive a Honda, especially like a hybrid. Honda does not chase numbers.
No.
Honda chases overall package.
And feeling. Yeah.
So what'll happen is you'll get a car like a Civic Hybrid or an Insight or something, and maybe it will not hit the MPGs of the Toyota counterpart, but it will be a better, higher quality vehicle to drive, maybe less 5 or 10 MPG. So for example, I drove the Honda Civic Hybrid, and I love this new Civic Hybrid. It is such a good car. It's pretty luxurious. It's fun to drive. It's nice to drive. It's fuel efficient, but
it's faster than the SI.
It's faster than the SI. It's got a lot of torque. It's a really nice car, and it feels great. It's a good car to drive. And people will say, well, I could get a Camry that gets better fuel economy. But I'm like, I don't know that the Camry is the better car to own and live with and drive. Like, and that does come down to personal preference, but I do believe that Honda's chassis engineers come before their marketing team. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they don't spend a lot on our marketing budget.
They do and they don't. I believe they do when it comes to like racing. I mean, obviously you see them like, you know, that's fucking crazy. But when it comes down to like, what are we aiming for? The marketing team in some OEMs, they're like, if you don't hit this number, I can't sell this car, right? Because I need to say, I need to be able to say this is the highest power in its class. I need to be able to say this is the most efficient car in its class. Honda seemingly is like, yeah, we're going to make it drive good and you're going to like it. And if it gets 5 miles per gallon less than the 60 mile per gallon Toyota, then don't worry, they'll know the difference when they drive it. And I've always felt that when I drive these cars where I'm like, look, I think when you put hybrid on a car, which they're slowing down. They don't do that anymore usually because like now it's just sport touring. The sport touring just is a hybrid. When you say hybrid, it sounds like you're trying to put up a big flag and say MPGs, MPGs, when really it's like, no, this is just a balanced powertrain that allows you to recuperate energy. To me, that's what a hybrid should be. But what people hear is, well, the Toyota hybrid gets better. So anyway, I just think they're more well-rounded cars. It's what I like about Honda. And they very, very, very rarely chase numbers because they're almost never the most powerful. They're almost never the most efficient, but they're usually the better car to drive and live with. So that's my 2 cents. That's my Honda fanboyism.
No, that's good. All right, so
What else you got?
There was somebody who asked a question.
All right.
What the heck was it? You wanted to talk about?
There was a couple. I have one here from M Varga 73. It says, "How do you resist the urge to push the car sometimes? That I'm driving. I wouldn't say soulless, but lawfully." So, all right.
Okay.
This is interesting. So I have changed my driving style for a couple of reasons. I used to push cars harder.
I was going to say we should talk about what we used to do 10 years ago.
Yeah, we used to go out and like mob. Like we used to like hit roads hard. We used to go out. I was really pretty shameless about like if you're on an empty highway. Well, I did give a shit. I gave a shit about safety. I gave a shit, but like it was I think the same way like Cannonball goes in and out of vogue, so too does the idea of enthusiastic
spirited driving. Yeah.
And like I always say, there is a time and a place. And I will never encourage anyone to drive anywhere above or even near their full capability on a street. You shouldn't do that.
Should never break the speed limit.
Well, I'm not going to go that far. But what I will say is I think when it comes to demonstrating a car, especially when it's like a classic car. I don't have to take a Boss 302 and put it on the ragged edge sideways. I think that's irresponsible because I don't think and I also don't think it's within the spirit of borrowing someone's car, right? Like if it's my car, I might go and like really go for it. Or if I'm on like some empty mountain road with the owner and we're following each other playing cat and mouse, like that's a different story. But when someone says like, hey, here's my baby, here's this thing that I've worked hard for that I love, and I want you to share this with people because you have a platform to do so. Well, I'm not going to do much more than some straight line pulls to show you how the character of the engine unfolds. Like if I'm in a Ferrari, I'm going to redline it through 2 or 3 years, but I'm not going to do 130 miles an hour in
I'm going to top it out.
No, that's irresponsible and it's silly, and people will not like it. The other thing is I am selling a product. I'm not the car. I'm selling my video.
Yourself.
And I am not going to sell very many videos if I'm an asshole. So this is why, Marcus Brownlee got in a bunch of shit because he was driving like 96 miles an hour in a school zone or something like that. Maybe it wasn't a school zone, but it was slow. Anyway, I'm not using that to call him out. I'm just saying like it didn't go over well.
Yeah.
And I know a ton of people who would do that anyway, but just not on camera. And I would be like, hey, don't do that. It's a bad look. And the reality is it's like you're balancing this level of like enthusiastic driving and time and a place and making sure that what you're doing is both fun, unique, exciting, but also not irresponsible or dangerous.
Safe for the other people.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's two sides of this, right? There's the side of you being a YouTuber and you have to respect what people think of you. So you can't be going out doing, donuts in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Which on camera.
Objectively safe,
like you're not going to yeah, exactly. Regardless.
As long as it's not like a crowded Walmart parking lot on a Saturday.
You're not going to go to Cars and Coffee and be like, watch this.
No.
You would never do something like that.
Time and a place.
But also, I would also say that we have also gotten older and matured. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it with you, but for me, it's like I go to the racetrack now.
Oh, it's like, I mean, you can't.
Once you do that and you do it a lot.
Not comparable.
It's not even like I get no joy about, going down. I mean, I still get joy of it, but it's not what I used to get out of going down a road really quickly.
And the reality is like there's roads that I drive that are like lovely roads that like if they were a racetrack would be really fun to drive hard. But the thing is there are people. Like there's a road that I use in almost every video, and there's old videos where you might see me push a little bit. I stopped doing that because I'm like, you know what? There's people who are walking on this road. There's people who are walking their dogs. And sometimes those people are like clueless and they're staring at their phone while their dog is on a leash like 12 feet away from them. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, so I play the game of if I don't have line of sight, I will not push. Now, there's always going to be the person who says, if you go 36 and a 35, you're a speeding piece of shit and you should be executed. Those aren't the people I'm after. I don't care. But like if I'm going, let's say I'm going 45 or 50 and a 35, but I'm well within the limits of like the car. Like you can go 50 miles an hour in a corner and still be at like 4/10. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the car, of course.
So all I'm saying is leave room on the table, because if you come around that corner and there's a person or a cyclist or a child or a dog, you need to be able to reel it in or change direction, right? And if you're at 10/10, you have eliminated that option. So, it's really about just making sure you're well within the envelope of an unexpected thing. That's all. That's all it comes down to.
You said something to me a long time ago, like many, many years ago, and I still think about this. You don't shit where you sleep.
Absolutely.
And
you can't be doing this in neighborhoods. Especially where you live. And now with cameras, with dash cams, with cameras all over the street signs, it's not easy now
to do stupid things. And it's not good to do it, but I'm just saying like it's not what it was.
It's funny. I got scolded for going fast on a really empty, like desolate on-ramp once, and like it pissed someone off who was like, I can't, they lost their minds at me. Okay. And I was kind of shocked because I was with someone else and that person didn't get anything from I was like, this is interesting. Now, I won't get like into specifics, but either way, I was like, okay. And it kind of made me reevaluate like, okay, so not everybody gets it. Not everybody understands what's going on, because what they looked at was the speedometer. They didn't look at the context. And I get it. I get it that a speed is a speed is a speed. So they're going to say, hey, that's too fast. Okay. But it wasn't like I was in a school zone. I was in a really empty place. Now, the other side of this is those are people you're not going to convince.
No.
But it also let me know that I'm like, oh, this is what some people think, and I need to take that into account. And so I will bring that down. But where you'll see me shaking my fists regularly is like if I'm in a parking lot, people drive like 30 miles an hour in a parking lot. And so it's funny that people would be mad at me if they're like, you're in this empty, desolate place where the only thing you could hurt is yourself. And they'll be like, how dare you go 85 on this on-ramp? Whereas I'm like, bro, I just saw you doing 30 on your phone
eating
at Stop and Shop
chips.
That to me is where I'm like, you're the one who's going to kill somebody. That's when you're going to kill somebody. So I just, like I said, it's time and a place. If you're in a neighborhood, if you're in a school zone, if you're in a parking lot, if you're in traffic, cool it. 12 miles an hour in a parking lot. Seriously, cool it. Just go fucking slow. People don't look. You think people are distracted when they're driving? They're distracted when they're walking. They're just going to come out of the little alleyway or whatever, and you're going to slam into it like a nice little old lady who's just trying to figure out how to turn her ringer back on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whereas like the thing is though, there are people that just, like I said, they don't get it and they see the speed on the dashboard and they just go,
well, how many times have you been driving an older car that might be louder? And you're driving in a neighborhood and you drive by that one person who starts screaming, slow it down. You're going way too fast. And you're going like 15,
This
20
happened
miles
to
an hour.
me a few weeks ago in that Austin Healey 100. It's a fucking slow car. And it's a little red sports car from the 1950s or 60s. And I think it was a 55. And I went through 2 gears. I went, vroom, vroom. 35 miles an hour. Yeah. And there was a guy who was a runner and I went around, I gave him an entire lane because I had line of sight. So I gave him an entire lane. And you know what? He started to raise his hand and I thought he was going to wave to me like cool car. And he flipped me off and said, fuck you. And I'm like, bruv, what? And I was like, all right, but you know what? It's not going to influence me giving him space. It's like, yeah, that guy
still would have done it.
But I'm not going to suddenly be like, fuck runners and cyclists. I'm going to terrorize them. No, I'm still going to be like, well, I don't want to hit this guy. I don't care if he's an asshole. Guess what? If he's an asshole, his family probably sucks too. So if I hit him, I'm going to have to meet them in court. I don't want to. These people fucking suck. And like, just stay away. Just at the end of the day, I'm being safe. If someone starts screaming at me, fuck you. But I'm going to do what I do.
I've had that happen to me so many times in the Camaro, just like starting it and like moving it somewhere. And like, you know, it's usually like a mother and her children be like, slow it down. You're going 50. And I just laugh. You know, I usually just laugh and wave because I'm like, I'm going to piss you off no matter what I do. So
right. Well, and
there's nothing I can do to
the irony is that I've had firsthand experience, like I said, where someone will look at me like I'm a monster, but I'll see that same person driving in like my neighborhood at like 60 miles an hour. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm driving. When my neighborhood's like a little tiny neighborhood. It's like a little circle.
I
right?
like the name of your street though.
Yeah. Well, all right. So don't tell people that.
I know.
But I roll into that neighborhood so fucking slow. And it's not just because it's my neighborhood. It's because like I know that these are places there's kids, there's people, and like not only kids, there's like people like walking, like people walk around the neighborhood for exercise. So it's like, well, I'm not gonna like fly around a fucking corner. What's hilarious is that people would have the nerve to tell me that like, whoa, you drive fast. I'm like, on an empty road with line of sight in the middle of nowhere with no homes, and you're doing 60 in a 25 to get to your house.
Dermatologist.
You're flooring it wide open throttle up my street. And I'm like, I'm crawling at 15 miles. I'm like, what are you doing?
I think also it's the exhaust. It's the loud car thing where people just associate, and it's unfortunate that we're at this point where people just associate loud cars with idiots speeding and doing reckless things. And they're not wrong.
I'm not, the other thing is, I'm not saying that like, oh, this is the code every enthusiast follow. It's the code every enthusiast should follow. But like, trust me, we've gone on drives with like, you know, strangers or people and been like, yeah, we're not doing the rest of this drive with you because I'm like, I don't want to be associated with this shit. You guys are being idiots.
Or we've made our own mistakes when we were younger. So you know, nobody's perfect, but you know,
I'm gonna have is it Asa or Asa? Asa. Okay, sorry, Asa. I don't know. I only read his name. But anyway, Asa's gonna come on the podcast next week, I think, or no, 2 weeks. And I want to talk about rallies.
Oh, because he's a good person to talk about.
Like, this is the thing. It's like, I have a hard time reconciling this sometimes because some of the stuff I see on rallies, I'm like, oh my God. Like, if anyone sees some of this shit, like, this is a little sketchy. But then there's other times where I'm like, oh, this is really fun and I'm glad we're doing this and I wouldn't do this otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talk about it all the time. It's like, man, we miss going on back road drives, driving up to like a nice road in Vermont or Maine or whatever. But then you start thinking about all the stuff that comes with that.
Yes,
and
there's
I
a lot of
think
baggage.
There's a lot of baggage, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much baggage it might be when you do a brake stand at a traffic light.
Okay, well, we're not doing that.
Oh, but that's not what I know. We wouldn't do that.
But
I'm not
people
going to do that in my Honda
Right.
Civic.
Like, and we've had this conversation too, where we've seen really egregiously aggressive, fucked up driving, but then also been like, man, that kid can wheel a car.
Oh yeah,
like once in a while you do see something, you're like, you want to yell at them, but also be like, but my guy, you've got some car control. That was pretty impressive.
And I have some people that I
Just
know.
don't do it here.
Some old friends who I saw some very egregious things on the road.
Yeah.
But I couldn't say anything because I was speechless. This person had no driving, no like anything with
No formal
racing,
training.
no formal training.
But they're
nothing.
incredible.
But just like
They feel the car.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
was
then you're
just
thinking,
blown away.
what if we sent that motherfucker
said-
to Skip Barber?
I was gonna say,
be a
what-
genius, a
that
savant.
person, literally.
Seriously. So I think the other thing is that I like the time and a place thing. I think a true enthusiast is someone who understands where to do things, when not to do things. So whenever I see the news is always full of a car full of teenagers that crashes and 3 are dead, 1 survives or is paraplegic or whatever the fuck. And the story is the same every single time. It's 2 boys and 2 girls, and one of them was wearing a seatbelt, which is probably some poor girl in the back of the car who's like, I shouldn't have gotten in this fucking car with this psycho. And then it's always like mom's car or some Honda Civic that they have, and they're doing 80 in a neighborhood or on some like, oh, let's see if we can jump the car, this kind of bullshit. It's always the same kind of fucking road. And they always crash it.
Hit the tree.
In front of someone's fucking house.
Yep.
It's always like that. They always slam into a tree, right? And some guy walks out and he's always 65 years old going, oh my goodness, I woke up to this bang and I called the police and they used the jaws of life to get these kids out. What a tragedy. Don't be those fucking kids. It's so easy to just be like, hey, I like cars and I like speed. And I want my friends to fucking live. Don't put your friends in danger like that.
Go autocrossing.
Go autocrossing. And if you're going to go and play this game of like, hey, first of all, you don't push it at night after your couple of fucking White Claws, because these dumb kids love drinking bullshit alcohol and then going out and driving. I was like, don't fucking do that. Yeah. That's already your biggest mistake. And then the second thing is they're trying to impress a girl. They're trying to impress their friend. It's so fucking embarrassing. Do you know the tiniest PP energy you can have is being like 17 years old, or 16 for that matter, 16 and a half. You've got your JOL. You shouldn't even have these fucking kids in the car anyway. And then you go out and you fucking mob some road at 80 miles an hour in a car that you don't even know what tire tread looks like.
Yeah, brakes could be gone to hell.
You have no idea. You couldn't do a fucking pre-flight inspection of this car if your life depended on it. You don't know when anything was changed. You don't know how to drive a car. You've never done any of the things you're about to do anyway. Now you're about to do it with 3 of your friends in the car. Fuck you.
People who, for all intents and purposes, aren't going to even, for the most part, matter. Once you
Absolutely.
graduate high school.
And you know what? Oh boy, are we coming up on teenage car accident season, because it's the winter and winter break is coming up and these kids are going to be having their little parties. They're going to have a couple of beers. They're going to have to play their little ego games where their buddy tells them, you won't do this. And then their poor fucking girlfriend sitting in the car like, oh my God, I shouldn't have gotten in the car with Danny. And then that's the thing. There's always some innocent kid in the back that really shouldn't be in the car. So anyway, if I don't think I have that many young listeners, but if you have young people in your life, make sure you know that the tiniest PP energy in the world is racing around with 3 of your friends in the car on roads you don't know, in cars you don't know, with car control you don't have, on equipment that isn't prepared for it. Don't fucking do it. You look like an idiot. No one's impressed. I think you're a fucking moron.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh man, you nailed it.
It pisses me off because I'm like, you're so dumb for being dead. That's it.
Yeah.
These kids, I get it. There are horrible accidents where it's a wrong way driver on a highway. Sometimes that's not preventable because some other drunk asshole got on the highway and killed you. That's horrible. I know a bunch of people who have died that way. It's messed up. Or sure, maybe you always go 45 miles an hour on this corner and there's black ice and you went off that sucks.
It is what it is. It's a hazard.
A deer comes out. Bad things happen to good people, but bad things don't have to happen when they don't have to happen.
Yeah.
And if you have just chosen to be a monster, this is my last thing on this. I know I've been ranting for like 5 minutes. If someone in the car says, please stop, I do not feel comfortable with this. Slow down. Slow the fucking car down.
Yeah.
You are such a piece of shit if you are someone who is intentionally frightening someone in your car. Now, I know that there's backseat drivers who they're like, oh my God, hit the brakes. And you're like, oh my God, I'm like, nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
But if you are intentionally like, I'm going to hit it harder because you told me to stop and then you wreck the fucking car. Oh
You're
boy.
an idiot.
What a fucking asshole. So just
People
don't
like
be that
that.
guy. That's all. Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Because look, we've all been in cars where we've been the driver, and I have always had that rule where if someone says, I don't like this, I'm like, okay, we're shutting it down. I'll shut it down.
Yeah.
I'm not here to scare you. We're here to have fun.
No. And your friend should never have to tell you something like that. They're your friend, and you should never be scaring your friend. And if that's the case, then maybe you should reconsider your friendship with that person.
Yes.
If you're the person in the backseat saying, stop the car, stop the car.
And if you are like the teenager or 20 something who is like, oh shit, my only ride home is with like Johnny, and Johnny's a psycho and he always gets a little hotted up at night when he's driving his Fiero on his Monte Carlo. Like, oh, and he's gonna go wide open here. Like, just call a fucking Uber. I promise you it's worth the $30, $50, $70 to get an Uber home than to die with Johnny because he had to hit it in the Monte.
Okay, as a teenager, have you ever had to deal with a situation that you were the person you're like, I cannot believe I'm in the backseat with this clown?
Yes, absolutely.
And well, you're here to tell the tale.
Luckily, I mean, I think everyone's been that person.
I've been there.
Everyone's been in the back of a car with someone they wish was not driving.
Yeah. And some of the times it isn't even like someone doing reckless driving, like being an asshole, slamming on the brakes or turning really hard. It's like they don't know how to drive.
No, they can't drive.
They can't drive. And I'm in the back seat and I'm just like, we're gonna die. They didn't pay attention in driver's ed.
Yep.
Well, not like that would have helped, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
But they don't know what they're doing.
Well, we were in that Uber on the way back from the airport,
Oh
and
my
a car
God.
like broke down on the highway, and instead of just going around him smoothly, he stopped on the fucking Mass Pike, and me and you were like, "Oh no, this is how we go out," because we were not in we were not like an Escalade, we were in like a Corolla, and I'm like, "Fuck, if we get rear-ended by a
dead.
Peterbilt, we are toast. This is so stupid. I'm not going out like this." And we were both looking back, and we were like, "Go, go, go, go,
Yeah.
go, go, go!" We screamed at this Uber driver because we were like, "You need to keep going. Do not stop on a fucking highway."
Oh my God, dude, that was bad.
That's when I was like, "Oh, I don't like Uber."
Yeah. Yeah, that was not a bright
That was
spot.
horrifying.
That was horrifying. It was right on the bridge of the Mass Pike when you're going over like Harvard and
Yes.
BU.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, there's nowhere to go.
I thought we were going to die. I was
gone.
like, this is it. We just went on this beautiful vacation to the Caymans. We had a great time, and then we're going to die in this car on the way back. What a lame way to go. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many cooler ways to die, or so many cooler ways to like live your life. But like, it's so dumb to kill your friends because you decided to be a hot shoe in a situation that just doesn't call for it.
No.
What's cool is getting your fucking friends home safely.
Yeah, and then saying thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. That's it. If you want to look, if you're like, oh, I've got this fast car, show them a 0 to 30 if it's bad conditions or if whatever. But like, don't go like 90 miles an hour through some.
I think, and you and I have talked about this. When you're young and you get a fast car, you really need to have a lesson on how it works. Like when you go and buy any sort of toy, usually you're taught how to use it before you go and do it, right?
Yep.
How many times have kids just been like, oh yeah, I got a BMW, and then they crash it?
Well, the other thing is that cars today are much, much, much faster. So
Oh my God.
my car, I had a Mark III Golf, okay? Its top speed was 117 miles an hour, and I will tell you, it took a long time to get there. So you weren't accidentally going 100
Yeah.
miles an hour. It was a very deliberate choice for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of it is the car had I dynoed it. It had 94 horsepower, okay?
You dynoed it?
Yeah, we WPI, Worcester Polytech, always had dyno days for the motorsports club. So we'd go, yeah, just take the car. Which what I didn't know at the time was like it probably should have blown up on that dyno, but it didn't. Anyway, today, if you get a hand-me-down car from your parents, even if it's like some ratty old Infinity,
I was gonna say like
300 horsepower,
like an 03 Altima.
what are we
perhaps?
talking about? That's a fast
VQ.
car. VQs are quick. Dude, those motherfuckers go. And I remember that's the thing. It's like now kids have, or like, oh, I'm borrowing my dad's Tesla. Okay, well, that's a 800 horsepower vehicle.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? So there is a level of like, look, I get it. And if you want to show off the torque, like give it a little jolt, do your thing, but don't follow through. Just,
Don't stay in it.
Don't stay in it. Just get your rocks off. Show them that, like, if you got that Tesla, sure, light turns green. Show them that 0 to 30 real quick, and then just shut it down because it's enough. It's enough. Trust me, I've been in enough Teslas where the 0 to 30 has been.
That's the best part.
Oof! Oh my god!
It feels like a roller coaster.
And I'm like, I don't need to feel anymore. I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
No,
Anyway,
totally get it.
that's it. I think, you know what? I think that's it for what I have today.
That's a good way to end it.
All right. Yeah. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you to Garage 42 for hosting this podcast at the studio. Thank you to Eddie for coming on and being a guest. Go check out his podcast, The Backseat Drivers with Devin and Eddie. You can find that on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for joining the Patreon, donating a few bucks to keep fuel in the tank, enabling us to do more adventures and have fun and show you what can be done when you're a car enthusiast in the community, and hopefully continuing to just bring joy to otherwise shitty days. Because
Exactly.
sometimes I watch old videos just to feel something.
If you want to enjoy, our friendship, go back and look at those old videos of us doing ridiculous things.
It's great.
The old Tedward vlog videos, Thank you for having me on. I love being a regular guest,
Yes.
as they say. And it's always a good time.
I'm very shy, so I like having you here because then I don't have to adapt to new people.
You do not need to adapt to me. We have this banter constantly. So
Don't
the fact
forget-
that there's a mic, it makes no difference whatsoever.
It's the best. Don't forget to respect the drive, and we will see you in the next one.